Good morning. On this June 1st, 2021, Clackamas County Board of Commissioners, issues and updates. Gary, you're up.
We have an echo over there. Looks like Stephen has it covered. Thank you. All right, commissioners, we have a full, long list today. Hopefully we'll get done by the 12 o'clock hour. I have made some adjustments to the agenda this morning. The first is I'm moving to the start of the agenda, vaccine passport ban resolution draft. Commissioner Shull asked for this item. There was a draft in your packet. Commissioner Shull, would you like to kick it off, please?
Yes, thank you and good morning. In response to constituents' concerns about the potential for a vaccine passport, last week I put together a draft. That's a rough draft for consideration, for transparency, to get people to consider what a vaccine passport would do. Now, in that draft, which was, again, intended to stimulate discussion in the county about the potential for a vaccine passport, the mention in there about Jim Crow laws. During Reconstruction, after the Civil War, after the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were passed, some states in the South came up with laws that restricted civil liberties based on one's race. And a vaccine passport, if passed and implemented, would restrict civil liberties based on your medical record. And my constituents who compelled me to put together a draft to stimulate conversation in the county are concerned about the potential of having civil liberties restricted for some people who choose not to get vaccinated. Now, for the last year, we have been working hard to achieve herd immunity through vaccinations or exposure to COVID and the resulting antibodies. Now there's some word from Salem that instead of just working towards herd immunity, that a COVID passport might be implemented. And there's a 1996 law, federal law, the HIPAA law, which restricts any entity to demand your medical record. That's private. And so the draft was intended to bring attention to this potential problem, and that's it. It is not a draft that I'm asking the board to consider for adoption. That's what I have to say on that, Gary.
Anything else you'd like to say, Commissioner Shull?
I think that covers it.
Not at this time. I see somebody's in the queue. Is that Commissioner Fisher?
Chair Smith, if you wanted to make any comments before moving in the queue.
I am going to make some comments, but I just assume back cleanup. I would like you to continue with anything you've got to say.
I find this comparison to Jim Crow laws absolutely reprehensible. Oh, sorry. I want to be very clear. I don't believe it is the perspective of Clackamas County or this commission as a whole to support such insensitive and volatile comparisons and comments, and it is deeply disturbing. So I just needed to share
Are you
that.
finished?
Thank you, Chair
Okay,
Smith.
yeah, thank you. Commissioner Schrader?
Well said, Commissioner Fisher. I do find this very deeply disturbing, and it makes me very sad that that kind of comparison has been made with what we are trying to do in the middle of a pandemic in terms of public health safety, and somehow comparing it to the institutionalization of racism, essentially, in in our country. I don't think there is a comparison. I think they are qualitatively different issues. I'm very upset by this, as you are, and I cannot support this.
Commissioner Scholl?
Yes. The reference to Jim Crow laws has nothing to do with racism. It has to do with the restriction of civil liberties based on a law from a state. That is all. And anyone who has family going back to pre-1964 in the Civil Rights Act will tell you, especially if they lived in the South, that the restriction of civil rights is a cruel thing, and once implemented, it doesn't go away very soon. Jim Crow laws started right after about 1877 during Reconstruction, and they lasted for 87 years. That's my reference. When you pass a law that restricts civil liberties, they don't go away anytime soon. And civil liberties, in this case, has nothing to do with racism because it would affect all races the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scholl and Commissioners. I'm going to speak on this issue now. It is incumbent upon the elected county commissioners, as we are the leaders of all people in Clackamas County. And all through what we've been through the last year, we should understand that the use of certain terms and words have an emotional connotation to them. This resolution, unfortunately, came through without being vetted by staff, administrator, county council, or even myself, because I have allowed for a very liberal policy that giving equal say to any of my commissioners who want an item discussed, then they can put it on the issues list. And I will continue with that policy, except I will say this. All commissioners, including myself, have the responsibility to vet writings with staff ahead of time. Today, we are going to discuss and hopefully pass a history resolution acknowledging that history is an important tourism component. I have been working on that language for months. I've had 16 set of eyes look at that document before I brought it to prime time. And even when I did, my commissioners had additions, which I made allowances. That is what, as chair, I expect the work of every single one of my county commissioners to do. You don't just throw something, you don't throw gasoline on fire and then expect to retract statements. Marshal, you have been through so much. And at times, my heart has bled for you. I have given you allowances, I have supported you, and you should know better. I find this resolution as originally submitted abhorrent and irresponsible. And I do not believe that the references to Jim Crow, regardless of history, support the greatest good for Clackamas County. Now, rightfully so, I agree that passports are not the way to go, and I do not think vaccines should be mandatory. It is still a choice. And I will fight for that right as long as I'm here. But I will not tolerate from anybody, including you, sir, the language of this resolution. It will not proceed today. It is dead. And unfortunately, you have irreparably harmed any further action that this board can possibly take on reference to passports. Now, there's probably a good percentage of our citizens who would agree that vaccine passports are not what American citizens should be doing, and I agree with that as well, because it's still a choice. But this resolution today will not proceed, and I believe I have the votes to do that. I am also ready to take some action, but I see a couple lights on. Paul, you're up.
Yep. I just want to say I had a hard time with this. I concur with my colleagues' concerns. Unfortunately, we can't strike this from the record. It's a public record. That resolution, regardless how it was intended to be used, will remain a public record. And any kind of conversation in the future about passports is somewhat going to be compromised by this commission to even discuss it because of the particular language and the resolution in place. That said, I don't think the passport is something that a local government should do in the first place. I think this is something that's done at the federal level right now and the state level, and something that we can't really, really frankly, influence, in my opinion. That's my humble opinion. There are resources here at the county. We have, if there's a legal argument and the context was passports, we have Mr. Madcore and his team of staff that could have assisted, Mr. Scholl yesterday, well, not yesterday, but in weeks past or going forward. We have staff, we have advisement, we have a number of resources here and talent here at the county to help advise a conversation about passports. And going into case law, I think you can be selective about that, but again, this is not the place. So I find it very unfortunate we're here today with this particular situation of bringing something with tremendous racist overtones that at a time following a weekend, a memorial, it's just the timing couldn't be worse, in my opinion. That's all I have to say.
Commissioner Scholl.
This was a draft document to stimulate discussion, and that's what it's done. There's nothing in there that should be construed as coming from a racist perspective. In fact, I would submit that the people in this county of color, would be the most against civil restriction based by a passport, and that they will understand what I'm referring to when I refer to those Southern laws that restricted civil liberties after Reconstruction. This was intended to stimulate discussion as per the overwhelming interest from my constituents who do not want to see a COVID passport. Thank you.
Have you finished?
Yes.
Well, Commissioner Stoll, you're getting your wish, because this sure has stimulated concern right across America, and you will answer to this, and you will answer alone to this. I'm prepared to make a motion. I'm going to move that Commissioner Scholl be stripped of all liaison committee assignments where BCC influence is assumed.
I'll second that.
Motion has been made to strip Commissioner Scholl by me, seconded by Martha Schrader. Any further discussion?
Yes, I would just like to say I take no pleasure in this at all. This is very sad. It's very upsetting. I'm trying not to, this is not a personal thing, but I see no other recourse. And I am very sorry it has come to this, but I just don't see any other way right now. And I would be glad to talk to our fellow commissioner privately. I don't like doing these kinds of things publicly to one another. I've always kind of held that as a standard for myself, and I feel like this is also a violation of how I also want to treat people, but I honestly see no other recourse right now.
Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, I encourage everyone in this county to read the draft resolution. And I also would like to ask the board how my liaison to the Fair and Rodeo Board, the Parks Board, or anything else like that can be possibly affected by my intent to put out to the county this issue to make sure it got some attention. I see no reason why this board would restrict me from my liaison duties, period, end of sentence.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Stroll, you and I have talked privately, we have talked openly about many of the issues that have plagued you since the beginning in January. I'm sorry you do not understand. I'm sorry you do not understand the effect that words have on people. Words mean substance. I have given you great latitude, as I would to any of my commissioners. By the way, I've given you extreme grace. I've tried to counsel, as many people have tried to counsel. But in all good measure, I cannot allow you to go out into the community where our boards and other commissions with a loose tongue. Sonia Fisher, are you up?
Yeah, Chair Smith, you said it very well. My thoughts exactly. I am sure that there are some people who would defer to the expertise of Marshal, who has demonstrated himself as racist and bigoted. And you know what? There is a fine line between ignorance and hatred. And it's a blurry line. And I am just so concerned about the confidence that Mr. Scholl has in making such blatantly offensive statements. And I urge you, Commissioner Scholl, to work harder to constrain the bigotry that comes out of your mouth. It cannot represent Clackamas County. And so with that, I will be supporting Chair Smith's motion to strip you of your liaison duties.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I too find no pleasure in this whatsoever, but Commissioner Scholl, as a colleague, I'll just say that being aware of sensitivities, the environment, the times in which we live in today, what we say and what we bring up in conversations has to be really thought through. And sometimes these things maybe, have constructive intent. However, whether or not that's in play here is hard to know. But I think we just have to realize that decades and decades of people have been hurt and have been marginalized. And there are certain things that you don't bring up in certain conversations because of those people that have been impacted. And in Clackamas County, we are an open county to everyone. And there are people in this county and in this region that would take those kinds of comments to heart personally. I mean, and not when I say heart, I mean, it would impact them in a negative way. That's the world we live in. And I can't respond to your question as far as the Fair Board, as far as assignments, but I can say that, think through, use our staff, get advice. Similar counsel I have shared with you in the past is seek advice, learn, talk to those populations, those people. It's hard to empathize, this mask, hard to empathize with other people if you haven't lived in that kind of an experience or that kind of world or that kind of situation. But I think talking to those folks or listening to stories or reading can tell you more or learn more from this. But I hope this is a learned experience. But in light of the, in light of having that document in our record, which I struggle with, I just find it extremely troubling how it will be perceived and how this county will be perceived when we're trying to work our way out and demonstrate as our core values that we are a county, we recognize equity, diversity, inclusion, and that particular topic or that particular citing in history is something that is not a topic that one would bring up.
Commissioner Scholl.
Yes. For the citizens of Clackamas County that are hearing this today, we must not be afraid to refer to mistakes in the nation's history in the past. I referred to the Jim Crow laws as a mistake because they restricted civil liberty based on race. I would ask the people of the county who are hearing these proceedings today to consider what partisan motivation might have come from some of my constituents. Second, read the draft, and you will find it is devoid of bigotry and racism. Thirdly, I referred to those laws of the southern states during Reconstruction because they are a good example of what I want to avoid in this county, and that by referring to them, we are reminded of history and can learn from history. That's why I put it in there. I didn't come here today to mince my words. I came here to do what I think is my job and respond to my constituents. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Fisher.
Chair Smith, I'm very concerned about the perception of Clackamas County. I agree with Commissioner Savas that this is a tremendous stain on our reputation. I am not quite sure what to do about that. I want to lean on my fellow commissioners to see what other actions. It's obvious that Commissioner Scholl does not understand that comparing a requirement to wear a mask if you are unvaccinated to the destruction and devastation that the Jim Crow laws, what occurred, people could not attend certain places. It led to arrests if you used a water fountain that wasn't designated. It led to lynchings. It led to death. Making that comparison is incredibly painful, not only for communities of color, but for our entire community. And the inability to see that, Chair Smith, maybe we need to be stronger. Maybe we need to ask for an additional censure to the original censure where we asked Mr. Scholl to resign, because this is truly unacceptable, that Mr. Scholl continues to dig in his heels and justify these statements.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. We have one motion on the table for right now. Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, and just further thinking, Commissioner Scholl, I just would have probably advised that that maybe one should just reference the Constitution of the United States and those protections that it provides, and use that as a defense. I think that would have been a wiser move in absence of counsel or other advice that I probably would have suggested something like that. I mean, there's a lot of protections in our country, and I think, justifiably, people say, well, what's that done for us over all these, these hundreds of years? And I think it's done quite a bit, but is it perfect? No. And I think that's why we have legal representation. I think we're in a unique time and place in this country like no other time that I've experienced. And this is, first and foremost, up front and center, and the most sensitive times of all, that we need to recognize that everyone is equal, and how that is applied in a state of emergency because of COVID and the laws. That is a tough one to navigate, but that's not a place for a local government to be. That is a setting or a venue that is a higher level of government than us. I appreciate the willingness to have that conversation. But you know, I think educating ourselves as to the passport of where this is going will be determined again by a higher office than the county.
Chair, can I call for the question?
Commissioner Scholl's in the
Oh, I'm sorry.
queue?
Okay,
Is
then
that
I'll call for the question after Commissioner Scholl.
And then I have one statement.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Scholl, you're up.
Yes, I agree that I could have referenced the Constitution of the United States. But in 1877, there was a Constitution of the United States. There was also 3 new amendments, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. The restriction on civil liberties in the southern states happened despite those things. And the concern of some of my constituents that Salem could do the same thing to us. That's what this draft is about. Again, it is devoid of bigotry and racism. It was intended to cause transparency and discussion. That's what I'm here for. I represent the people who elected me, and that's what I'm going to do, irregardless of what the other board members say. I will not be censored. I will say what I feel, and I will do what I think. Thank you.
I'm going to finish this up before Commissioner Schrader calls for the question. The huge irony of this whole debate is I believe there is support in Clackamas County for not having a vaccine passport. I don't think any of us want to have to show our papers. That has historical connotations that are frightful, in my opinion. However, because of the damage of the language in this particular amendment, I'm not sure we're going to be able to revisit that. Although every commissioner does have their personal opinion, they can state that. I think this is a storm that we're going to have to weather. It's just been a horrid time, and I want to reiterate again as leaders, mark our words carefully. Commissioner Schrader.
So I'd like to call for the question. Call for the vote, please.
Christine, please call the poll.
Okay, Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
No.
Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 4-1. And what that means is, when you do not have a liaison duties, it means that you do not represent the Board of County Commissioners in your dealings. Thank you very much. Gary, what's up next?
All right, next item is wildfire building permit fee reduction term. Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development, will present. There was a memo in your packet. Go ahead, please, Dan.
Good morning, Chair Smith and the board, Administrator Schmidt, Dan Johnson, Director, Department of Transportation and Development. We are here to have a very brief discussion with you. We had a talk with you at a policy session back on April 13th, 2021, where the Board of County Commissioners gave us very clear direction on reducing building permit fees or waiving building permit fees for those that were impacted by the wildfire. Missing from that discussion was a dialogue about when that would term out, okay? We've had a variety of discussions with the board over the last year at issues and at that policy session. Staff had noted in a prior issue session a June 30th, 2022 deadline for that. We're simply here to get the board's affirmation of that, if they're comfortable with terming that policy or that fee reduction waiver program on that date.
Any comments from our commissioners? And Gary, what action do you expect us to take?
Just if you confirm that June 30, 2022 is acceptable, a head
Do
nod
we
is
need
fine.
a motion?
Stephen, should we have a motion for this?
Yes, please.
Yes.
I'll entertain a motion to extend the wildfire burning permit fee reduction program to June 30, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Martha has moved for the motion. Commissioner Scholl has seconded. Any further discussion? Christina, call the poll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
And Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you. Next, determination of waste management fees. Dan will also present. There was a memo in your packet. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you so much. Our Sustainability and Solid Waste Group essentially is in charge of garbage franchising programs throughout the county. And associated with those duties are the desire or the need to assess on an annual basis what those fees for those services might be. As you can imagine, there are a variety of things that go into that fee determination, one of which was a discussion you'd had previously with Metro about increasing the tipping fees and things of that nature. Personnel costs, fuel costs, a variety of things go into that discussion. And we vet that discussion through our Solid Waste Commission, who essentially they have given us a recommendation. And that recommendation does have a discussion around a fee increase, which is identified within the paperwork here. This is simply, I guess, to look all of you in the eye and say, if you have any questions about this process, we are coming back on June 15th at a formal policy session to present this. But this is a very technical discussion around how we set these fees. And if any member of the board has any questions about that, we are availing ourselves to meet with you one-on-one and just provide you information. And that's basically the intent of this discussion.
So you're asking for one-on-ones with commissioners, is that right?
If they desire, if they have questions, yep.
Commissioner Savas?
I just had a question. I see what the recommendation was out of the committee, but when this came up before us recently, wasn't that amount much higher?
That is one portion of this discussion. That is simply the tipping fee, which is identified by Metro and set by Metro.
I'm not talking about the tipping fee. We talk about the rate increase following the tipping fee discussion. We had the tipping fee discussion a couple months ago. I'm talking about the discussion we had just 3 weeks ago. And that rate was much higher. I see some heads in the back nodding yes. I'm just curious, what was that amount? That the ask? I think wasn't it like 20% or 25%? Okay.
Got to come forward and talk, please. Come to the microphone.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Rick Winterhalter, Clackamas County Sustainability, and that's about a 1685 increase, about 17%. So because of the delay in the tip fee, because they didn't increase it last July, we had a little higher than we would normally see, as well as the discussion that Metro shared with you the other day, Commissioner.
All right. So this is obviously a reduce. It's not going to go up as much. Recommended by the committee not to go up as much, or are we just parcelizing elements of this and not seeing the big picture here?
Well, the entire tip fee increase that was presented is represented in the fees. So but it is just a portion of those fees, about 20% of the direct cost. So that's why it may not seem as large, but it's.
Okay, well, Chair, I just want to say I do have a lot of questions, and maybe you could give me a pie chart or some kind of a chart, a visual
Absolutely.
that shows all the fees and how they intersect, come together, and what the processes are that come before us, because honestly, I thought that our annual review really touched all of those when the tipping fee came up separately, and we were told it was a component of, and granted I know how that came forward, not in its usual circumstance. So that's where I've been enlightened, and really realize how much more I need to better understand this. So
We can prepare some materials for you that we'll distribute to the board in its entirety. And again, if you have any questions and would like to schedule some time to run through that materials, we're available to do that. So
That's fine. I think that's really
just to
good.
finish, I'd just like to say that it might be beneficial for the entire board to have that discussion when it comes back to us. So having those materials or that kind of level of detail would be great. And I'm not
Absolutely.
asking for deep detail.
Commissioner Savas, that was the intent of the next policy session on this, and then one-on-ones are in order if the commissioners want them. I would really urge you to do that, please. That would be nice. Thank you, Dan. Gary, what's up next?
Great, thank you. Next, parking lease for County Council's office. Stephen, go ahead.
Thank you, Gary. Morning, Commissioners. Stephen Madcore, County Council. What we have is the County Council's office has leased a parking spot, one spot in downtown Oregon City within proximity of the courthouse for a number of years. The rate is $70 per month for a total of $840. We would like to continue with that with the board's approval. What it does is allows our attorneys to attend hearings and trial without having to contend with the 2-hour parking limits and other things along those lines. It's a good rate, and we have a good relationship with the landlord, and I'm hoping that I can get board authority to delegate authority to the county council to sign this real property lease for $840 with Tlesnik Enterprise. It's behind the dentist office is where it is.
Stephen, do we need a motion on this?
I would like a motion, please, to formalize it, and I will also offer it to any commissioner or county administrator if they ever want to park downtown Oregon City. You have a good spot there.
Wow.
I
Boy,
moved
that's
us-
coming from an attorney, a carrot on the end of the
know,
stick.
yeah.
I can't wait to go to court, by the way. Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Paul, you're up.
Yeah, I move to support the lease, the renewal.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Commissioner Savas to support this lease and seconded by Commissioner Scholl. Any further comments on this? Seeing none, Christina, please call the poll.
Yes. Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
And Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, a Budget Committee process debrief. While it's fresh in your minds, Commissioners, I would love to hear any feedback you have about the Budget Committee process from last week, things you'd like to see differently or to be improved for next year while it's fresh in your mind. If you just would like to take a few moments to give that feedback, I welcome that.
On the budget, what I came away with was there was one budget director who seemed to be able to plead her case for additional FTE, and that was heard more than other departments' plea for additional FTE, and I am not in appreciation of that, although I understand the need. I understand the need for additional FTE in any department, and I felt, because she was up first in the queue, that set the tone. Now, I have said time and time again, we have got to manage within our revenues that are coming in. And it's the very same department head that said our revenues were going to flatten, but yet she asked for 2 additional FTE at a cost of $200,000. She might be able to get a grant, and Gary, I am very serious. It should be subject to the grant or any other funds that she can find. I also like the idea of departments wanting to purchase a little more software to make their jobs easier, because then if you have an addition of software that helps you manage X, Y, and Z, and then that frees up your time on FTE, and I don't think that really got the attention that I intended, because there was so much. Folks, anybody watching our budget process last week, it was very impactful, it was very stressful, and there was a lot. So there was a couple departments that I'm not sure if it's allowed in our budget or if we have room, but the software purchases were, in this case, nominal compared to what that was. And don't get me wrong, I understand the workload, but we're just going to have to figure out how to manage that, and you've done very good. Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Smith. There's a lot that I really appreciated about this budget cycle. I really liked the format of the presentations. I thought they were very good. I liked the focus on, again, focusing on what results and what our outcomes are. That gave a good frame to the budget. The piece that I wish we could have had, so I'm very much in support of us having a sustainable budget that holds the line on general fund spending, but it would have been very helpful if every budget that came before us told us how that impacts their delivery of service, whatever it is. Because it wasn't until the public comment that we got a good picture when it talked about the reduction of dollars for our domestic violence shelters, that really came to light when we heard from the public on what the direct impacts of holding the general fund steady. And I am certain throughout Clackamas County, there will be those impacts. So I'm looking forward, before we finally adopt, I'm going to need that, for me personally, to feel comfortable when we do adopt, because I want to know how that's affecting delivery of service for our constituents. Because for us as a budget committee and as the county commissioners, that's really our job, is to make sure that our budget meets the needs of the residents of Clackamas County as best as possible. So it's a very important point.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Scholl, you're up.
Yes, I'd like to thank County Administrator Schmidt for the way he worked with the department managers this year, because last year I observed the budget hearings from home on Zoom. And so this was my first year sitting through the budget hearings as a commissioner, and it went very smoothly. I was impressed with the standardization of the briefing formats, and it went the effectiveness of that is evidenced by the fact that by noon on Thursday, we are done. Thanks, Gary.
Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I've been doing these budgets for a number of years, as you know, and I thought this budget was well-organized, it was transparent, it certainly has moved us forward with a results-oriented process, which has been our goal for at least, how many years, Commissioner? Since you were here.
Yeah.
Before.
Many
And
years.
it was really an excellent. I'd also like to echo a little bit about our nonprofits. One of the reductions was also in Northwest Family Services. And I do know that it was suggested that at one point that reduction was children of incarcerated parents. I don't know if that's the cut that this budget decrease reflected. I would really like to know that. That's been a long-standing program that we've had. And also, one of our providers that we really have not done as much as we should be doing, I believe, but we do have a constrained budget, I get that. But I do believe our workforce board deserves a little bit more attention. Largely because they are the ones that really connect people to jobs and employers. And also they are the ones that have the handle on the real need for preschool education as well as after-school programs in order to help working parents succeed. I know there's a limited budget. I know that these are concerns. But if we can keep some of this front and center, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, well, I certainly had a different approach, and I mentioned that last week about my, about the budget and the budget process. I appreciate the good work. I don't have anything to complain about. I do know that we're under a very tight situation, and it's going to get tighter every year. The sacrifices and the consequences are numerous, but to get ourselves into a discussion over each and every one of those would extend the budget conversation for weeks, frankly. I think, frankly, if the suggestion is that we understand what those consequences are, that they be put in writing and be part of the budget, you know, what those impacts are. Again, on May 5th, this board voted to support the courthouse, and I won't go into the details of that, but in a way that I think, I'm supportive of the courthouse, but I think we ought to have every option open to reduce those costs and impacts of the general fund as possible. The path we took does not give us that allowance, other than a competitive thing in the final cost. But my concern, and I'm going to go back to, I haven't said this for a long time, but about 8 years ago in the labor negotiations, we were in the midst of a labor negotiations, and there was a proposal that was approved. And I made the comment is, do you realize the long-term consequences of this decision? Because it was significant as far as the cost going forward. And we were given projections every year of what the forecast would be for years out, 5 years out, 5-year forecast. And the 5-year forecast in 2012, 2013, and 2014 showed that today, last year, even the year before and the years ahead, we would have $20, $30, $40 million of discretionary general fund money. Do we have, Gary, we don't have that kind of money. It didn't come to be. Several years ago, when I made the plea that you're budgeting, you can't do that. The numbers don't add up. The forecasts are wrong. I was ridiculed. Actually had two of my colleagues ridiculed me. And the budget committee ignored me. And, you know, later to come out to find out that my concerns were valid, They were real, and we are now suffering those consequences. I say that with the fact, again, about May 5th. I support the courthouse. It's going to cost money. The impacts are just a little bit different. But the point of the matter is, every year is going to be tighter and tighter, and people need to recognize that. I support staff in trying to make those adjustments, but it's not going to get any easier. It'll be tougher next year, and the sacrifices will be more. And when we run out of these CARES Act money, we run out of the APRA money, the only people that can help us is going to be the state. So for all those needs where people are directly impacted, we're going to have to look to the state for all that assistance and help, because it's not going to come from the tax base. It just isn't there.
Regarding Commissioner Savis's comments on the courthouse, then why don't you help us roll up your sleeves and we'll find savings in our future budgets. And I think that momentum is already in place, and I do think there is a plan going forward on that. And if you really say you support the courthouse, then help us make it a reality. The state is helping us by $94.5 million. And according to law, the counties must furnish courthouses in their counties. And whereas maybe I would have rather built another structure in our county for another need, this one came to the surface because we did have a 50% match. And it was not a decision that I arrived at lightly. As a matter of fact, anybody who knows me in my year-long campaign for this position, I was very critical of the process, but we were able, since I came on, to find a place for the courthouse in our budget without raising fees and without raising taxes. Additionally, I want to thank my commissioners for their unanimous vote on our budget going forward. It was a 5-0. And our Citizens Budget Committee, the 5 members, so it was a 10-0 vote in approval of our budget. And I find that significant, and it's a reflection of the good presentation that was made by administration and our department heads, and the willingness for our department heads to be transparent and forthcoming with all the questions that we had. And on to bigger and better things, Gary.
Very good. Thank you for the process recommendations. We'll put that together for next year. Already starting to plan next year's presentations. Thank you. Next, supportive housing services potential bridge funding. This is about the dollars coming from Metro. We have staff from H3S and Finance, Elizabeth Comfort, Rod Cook, and Stephen Madcore, County Counsel. To advise you, we have a whole packet that we submitted in your packet for you with some background memos, a recommendation from Stephen, our County Counsel, on processes you may want to take going forward. You do have a decision to make ideally today if possible, because in 29 days, there'll be some impacts if you do not. So I respectfully suggest you take about 30 minutes for this conversation, and then if you need more time, we can either come back later today or schedule another time this week.
I think that's a good idea. I think we need to fully vet this and maybe make a final decision this afternoon in case any single commissioner, including myself, needs additional information during the break. Gary, who's up?
All right, so I guess if, who would like to start, please? Rod? Thank you.
Yes, I'll get us started. So this issue has come before you on multiple occasions, even during the budget process. So I won't rehash all of that, but I think there's some key pieces to this, and that had to do with the main piece is the Metro, uncertainty around the Metro funding that's coming forward. And I know we've had Elizabeth Comfort talking to Metro, and I think Steve Madcore and his team have looked at some of the tax collection issues around that. So we all have a piece to give you, and really just needing to know what more you need to know, and to have you be clear on any outlying issues. We have put together from our program, let me go here. My budget, or the H3S budget, had a placeholder for $10 million in there to allow a pathway for supportive housing funds to come through it. So that's the budget you just approved. We took that $10 million figure and put together a calculation of what it would cost how we would spend that 10 million. And that's a minimal budget. That's current programs that exist today. And if we had 10 million to work with, what that would look like throughout the whole year. And so we have that. That was one of the memos that you have. I think it's page 11, 8? I'm sorry.
15.
Oh, page 15.
15 of the packet.
Yes, of the packet. And so that's our latest memo to you or to the county administrator describing if we were using that $10 million figure as a base, this is how we'd spend the dollars. And these programs listed, as you see, essential services budget, those are the pieces that we say that they're currently running. And if we were able to move forward with the budget and potential funding, this is what we would prioritize. And we have at the $5 million, now I'll go to $5 million because that's what's been offered by Metro as a potential loan. So you'd see at the $5 million mark, we'd be able to go 2 quarters, and that's half the year that we would be funding, and we would come to you. I think all of us would be watching pretty closely the ability to collect taxes, the funding flow that was coming forward, and anything that would be happening out of Metro. So we'd basically, on a month-to-month basis, be having to watch this very carefully to make sure that any funds we anticipate coming are coming. And I'll let finance, who can talk about or Elizabeth talk about dollar amounts and Mr. McCord in terms of any legal things. So I kind of went all over the place, but for us, the basis for the programming is based on the budget that you've passed, 10 million. We have a $5 million loan possibility, and so we think we could operate for 2 quarters, and that'd take you up to the 5 million. So that's what, from a program standpoint, that's what we're moving towards.
I have some questions, as I know all our commissioners, but I think we'll let Elizabeth and Stephen finish their presentations. Is that the way we want to go with this? Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I'm Elizabeth Comfort, Finance Director here with Clackamas County. So just a few things. You know, I know Rod shared the first 4 quarters. I'm really looking at the first 3 quarters because we're anticipating April 22 that they will have a bigger draw. There's 2 types of taxes that Metro's collecting: the business over gross over $5 million, and then personal income tax, and that starts January of 22. 1% over 125 for a single, 125,000, or 200,000 for a couple. And so those personal income taxes, those are going to be collected potentially and really be available for the end of the 3rd quarter, which is the April of 22. So I'm looking at how many dollars we need to get us there before a larger tax distribution. So as Rod was sharing, you know, it's about $2+ million each quarter to function. It's the minimal amount for these programs. My concern is, you know, how much can we get initially July 1? Right now, I'm waiting for a text back from Metro to see how much they collected in in May, because our distribution for April would be very minimal, less than 60,000. And so I don't anticipate the large number coming in, even a projection of 3.2 million by July 1st. I would be very hesitant to count on that.
I agree with that. I read those numbers, and I found that to be quite optimistic.
So I don't want to give my personal opinion, but those are just some of the things I'm thinking about as I want to share these. So we have gone to Metro to ask for an interim loan. I've requested with administrators' support that the dollars that they've offered of $5 million, which is really kind, come at no interest. And the reason I asked for no interest is because we would be anticipating no additional costs for these programs that we would be having because of the tax collections. And so I don't want to incur any additional debt that would take away from another program to pay interest. I also requested that we pay the $5 million would then come out of future tax collections that have been greater than 15 million. And not just as the dollars come in, repay that 5 million. And the reason for 15 million is because as we're getting the program started, if, for example, if we received 7 million in our tax distribution, they took 5 million back to repay that, we'd be left with 2, and then that wouldn't really support any of the ongoing programs. So I have requested them to consider those. They've responded, said yes, they will look into our request, and that there would be no time frame for that repayment of the 5 million, as long as when we reached 15 million in our distribution, they would pull or withhold that 5 million to repay their coffers. Because I think it's all about, once we get the program starting, we don't want to have then a deficit and a pullback on funding to continue those programs. The other option, so that's one option, is, kind of utilizing their funds or do some type of self-funding, through our general fund or future programs maybe later in the fiscal year. Count on the Metro funding to come in, so those dollars would then be available from the budget for later in our budget year.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Stephen, you have comments, please.
Really nothing to add to that, Chair. We explored earlier other funding opportunities, the ARP money, the CARES money, rental assistance dollars, and we determined that those really were not available for this. So it sounds like Elizabeth and Rod have done a great job in negotiating with Metro some terms that would be favorable, and we'll, if the board directs us, we'll certainly help memorialize those terms and move this forward.
Okay.
I have a couple commissioners in the queue. I also have some comments. I'm not sure who was up, either Paul or Martha. Take a stab, either one of you.
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, so I'm looking at page 15. I have a lot of questions, and probably there's not enough time actually to get to my questions, but I'll just
Paul,
get to a few of
guess
them.
what? We're going to make time.
Okay, well, great, thanks. So I'm at page 15, and I'm looking at the first one for ESG Rapid Rehousing Program. Is that a new program? Is that brand new?
Not to my knowledge. And I do have Jason Kirkpatrick on Zoom, so if we could pull him in.
That's a good question. I'll wait for the answer on that.
So, because I'm going to have the same question for all of these.
I agree.
Okay, because after I spent hours last night reading the auditor's report, reading all the material, and, the words incremental, the words ramping up to implement this measure are embedded all throughout that several pages of the auditor's report. And the auditor's report did not touch on the legal proceeding that's in place right now before a judge. So I don't know what factored into his range of a $14 million annual income for Clackamas County up to $39 million at a high. But the range is 14 to 39. So I don't know what that's based off of. I don't know if that's based off the court case. I don't know what that's based off of, but the numbers that are being thrown out, I don't have a lot from Metro on this measure. That's not a hit to Metro, but I don't have confidence the numbers are real. So would like to see us ramp into, incrementalize this. So which of these programs, I know the Veterans Village is an existing program, and the language in that audit report also said, in the measure said that we will not be using general fund supported programs to be supplanted by these supportive housing services. If I said that correctly, I think you know my intent. We can't take these supportive housings and just use those monies to pay for services that already exist or paid with general fund. The Veterans Village, I believe, a portion of that, if not all of that, is general fund. I forgot. So I need help with those, if these are all new programs and why we are supplanting.
So I don't believe we are supplanted. I think Steve Madcourt and them, they did some work on that early on as related to another nonprofit that thought there might be some supplanting or loss of some funds that had otherwise gone towards housing. The way Jill has described it, it's the overall amount, the overall investment that the county would be making towards housing is what's counted, not moving dollars around. So let's use Vets Village, for instance. We are currently funding Vets Village. If we don't get any additional funds, we will not have any funds to continue Vets Village. And so that's how we'd use the money. All along, we have said, also to your point, that if we got new funds in, that was going to free up our current dollars to go outside the urban growth boundary. And that was the plan. That's in our plan. That's what we had talked about for months now. So again, I don't see that as supplanting. That's the county making further investments in different places. So it's really just moving the money around, as opposed to supplanting means that we basically would stop. The way I understand supplanting is that we would stop our investment altogether and use this new money, and then that other county money would go to some other effort. But we're keeping it all in housing or homelessness. And so therefore, I think, and I'm not a lawyer, we have our counsel here, so I think that's really a Steve Madcore question. But all the years I've been doing this work with all the funding I've ever gotten from federal, state, or wherever, that's how we've operated with it. I don't want to misquote anything, but my understanding of all these programs here, in some form or fashion, are currently in operation today. And so there are people in motels today that if we were to remove, if we don't have access to money, we will be asking them to move out June 30. And so, and now to what extent you have to do all that, that's where the program people can work their magic. But what I'm saying here is, my understanding, all these programs are existing today. And if we don't have any new funds coming in, we will be talking to people on June 30 about all these things ceasing to exist, and we will put people out on the street. So if Jason's in the room, I'll let him speak to this, because I really don't want to misspeak. I want the board to hear everything exactly how it is.
Yeah, Rod, I concur with everything you said there completely. So the Housing Authority has operated the Metro 300 grant, and so that program has enough funding to make it through August. The other programs, I believe, are all primarily H3S programs. So the Rapid Rehousing, the Hotel Motel, Serenity House, and the Vet Village. The Vet Village was funded through, I believe, PLP funds, which are coming to an end for that program. So all these programs have funding sources that are ending within the next few months. And so that's why these were continuing programs through H3S that would meet the needs for the Metro funding.
Okay.
Mr. Savas, you have more questions?
Yeah. So going back to the hotel model for 143, was that HH households? Okay.
Households, correct.
Households. So I read Mr. Madcore's memo on, the proper use of the APRA funds, but as my understanding is that those shelter beds there, or those hotels, were put in place as a result of COVID, and that the APRA dollars are eligible for COVID funding, and that the residents there can apply for the APRA dollars, it looks like. I'm just putting that out there. Because it's COVID related. We didn't have, prior to COVID, we didn't have hotels rented for any other, for this purpose. So it seems a legitimate use to be able to free up dollars we really don't have. And so Mr. Madcore, can we do that? And that's a lot of money. And I don't know if anyone's done the math on what that is per person or per household, but that's awfully expensive. That's probably the most expensive thing we can do. It's cheaper to put people in apartments than it is to put people in hotels, if anyone's done the math.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Savitz, I think you were referring to the rental assistance, 8.4 million. That's what the tenant has to apply for.
Correct.
Yes, correct. It's not like the county just can't, the way I read the rules, the county just can't blanket apply those dollars towards rental assistance. You have to show need, you have to demonstrate need, and that's based on the applicant, be it the tenant.
Right. So in light of this, why aren't we not talking to the 143 households about them applying for those dollars, as opposed to just taking that on at the detriment of other people who need it elsewhere, or some assistance elsewhere?
Good question. So Ken, To follow up, Paul, I'll let you continue. Just to follow up on this area, why can't H3S go out to the 143 households and ask them if they can apply to the 8.3 million rental assistance? Is that not done or whatever? I don't know. Mr. Johnson?
Yes, so Ed Johnson, H3S. The H3S Director's Office, we meet weekly to discuss plans, transition plans for these folk. So to be eligible for the rental assistance dollars, they have to be tenants. They have to be living in a house, an apartment, and then apply, because these dollars will be paid to the landlord and not directly to the tenant. And so these folk are all in hotels and motels. And so we need to, the plan is to transition them to permanent housing, and then if they can't afford to pay their rent, and these dollars are still available, then they could be used.
I see.
Is that the rent assistance that is from the state, or is that the rent assistance that we're looking at in the APRA funding?
All of the dollars, to my understanding, at least the ones that have come into H3S and to social services, those are to assist, even to that are going into the housing authority, those are available only for landlords. So the tenant is, either the landlord is applying or the rental, the tenant is applying, and then it's paid to the landlord, not directly to the.
Okay, so my earlier point, if you do the math and you look at the rents, let's say $1,000 for, a affordable income or affordable rents in our housing authority, $1,200 on the market or so, and a family unit is much more expensive, that still does not come up to $41,000 per person. And that's what this program is. It's $41,000 a household. There's cheaper ways of doing that and getting more leverage for these dollars. We got to leverage every penny. Why would we choose the most expensive model and interim at best? We're just flushing money. We shouldn't. We ought to be looking at a different model. What can we do?
I think the model is built on the foundation of temporary housing moving into permanent housing. What you're referring to is permanent housing. We all agree with you that it's cheaper, better, and more long-term. But we're talking about people we took off the streets. Mm-hmm. And they're coming with mental health issues, they're coming with drug and alcohol issues, they're coming with whatever issues that's got them living in the street. And we're transitioning them to a motel situation where we wrap around services to stabilize that family or those persons. And once they're stable, then we go negotiate with certain places that will allow people who are on the edge to go into permanent housing. So we totally agree with you, but it's a continuum that we have in place here. And so you're comparing, we agree with you, we want to get to the end state, but on the beginning state, we've got to throw everything we can at them to just let somebody just live with them. In some hotels, once they find out who they are, they won't let them stay there. So that's the extreme of what we're talking about. They're not your normal family that's just ready to go and go into a rental. It's just like we're throwing all the type of resources. And I would include with that our jobs program to get them jobs so that they can actually qualify for long-term. So some landlords won't let them come in. They can look great, but if they don't have income or they have a bad credit history, all those things are included in our programming. And so it's difficult for me to tell you everything now, but that's the continuum of services. So you're correct. You're looking at the most expensive piece of it, but that's not the whole piece.
Right, and I appreciate that, Rod, I really do. And years ago, prior to Commissioner Humberston and Commissioner Sonia Fisher getting on the commission, I was pushing for the Veterans Village as a model to build that transitional piece, right? Not just for veterans, but it was start with veterans and move on and build that model, because it's cheaper and it offers those transitional, that's what we ought to be moving on. The cost to do it like we do it at the Veterans Village is far cheaper and gets more distance and provides all those elements that you're speaking to. And we can actually do it in larger capacity, frankly, if we did it right. And I wanted to grow that model, right? It's working in other counties, in Oregon and other states. It's a model. This model is expensive.
Okay, I kind of think we need to move this on. Paul, do you have any more direct questions regarding the bridge funding, the question that's before us today?
Well, I do, again, I think I actually have more questions here than we have time, to be honest with you, Chair. So I would submit that I am not comfortable with making a decision today, and I got a list of questions I've already got outlined that I spent last night on. I'm not done finalizing that because I wanted to get some answers today. I was looking for, this session. I did study the packet in detail. On page 2, well, pardon me, just so everyone watches, it's not page 2 in the packet. The document that you sent on the 24th, that's dated May 24th,
Regarding the funding sources?
yeah, so on,
That is in here someplace.
Yep, it is. So it's on
Page
page 5? Yeah, well, yeah, I'm on page 4, it looks like. Yeah, page 4 of 15. And it talks about the 75-25 split for the two populations, population A, population B, right? And then down below, where it says capacity building, is that another 75-25 split or the same 75-25 split?
Let's see if Jason can answer that question.
Which page is that on? Sorry.
It's on page 4 of 15, and it is on page 2 of the memo. The May 24 memo. It's with the green.
Okay, yeah, I got it. Yes, that is also the capacity building programs. That's also split with 75-25.
Okay, so it's 75-25 of which piece? The 25%?
Population A is the 75% portion, which is the disabled and experiencing long-term homelessness.
Okay.
And then the 25 being the at risk of long-term homelessness as defined in the local implementation plan.
Okay, so with getting back to page 15 then, when you scroll back up to page 15, what's that split look like of those services? Split that out with your two 75-25 formulas and tell me what that looks like. Going to go back to page 15.
I don't have that right at my fingertips. I'll have to go back to the program folks and get that pulled for you.
Was that factored in your thinking?
These were just trying to establish existing programs to allow funding to move the supportive housing forward. Okay,
because it appears that if the funding level, here's my point, if the funding level, let's say it's between now and June 30th of next year, we only get $14 million. This may not be in proportion to that 75-20, those two 75-25 splits. So that's why it's relevant to know. We need to know what those splits are to make sure you're meeting the requirements. And I haven't even talked about admin cost that are spelled out in the measure. So that's just a starter. Chair, maybe.
No,
I think we need a work session.
We need time.
Can I comment on that?
Hold the phones, hold the phones. We're going to have to take this to a work session.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any commissioner is prepared today, including myself, to take out a loan from Metro. I don't think any commissioner is prepared to implement a program where we don't know that we have secure funding for sure. That's what's at issue today. I, like Commissioner Savas, had assumed that the Veterans Village had permanent funding. How long have we had that program in this county? And now I'm led to believe, oh, we need to hurry up and fund the Veterans Village. This reminds me when I was in the legislature on Ways and Means. I sat on the two largest budget committees, Education and Human Services. And quite frankly, the sky was always falling. And I'm trying not to have that same dispersion on this particular department, but we need to take time and a more thoughtful approach to this. My question directly is, why all of a sudden isn't the Veterans Village funded? When did you establish that? 2017, 16? I don't remember. And I'm so surprised, oh, now the funding is going to expire. I don't get it.
So from my perspective, and I'm sort of new to the housing piece of it, but I can tell you if you approved a plan that had certain assumptions, full funding, and now we're not talking about a plan with full funding, the funding has shifted. We're now talking about $5 million loan a $10 million budget.
Okay,
So
stop.
that's why everything has shifted.
Who shifted the funding? Why did the funding get shifted is my point.
Because
Somebody
Metro-
out there in the ether just like magically shifted our funding from our veterans folks to the, oh, now they don't have funding.
Smith, can I
No,
interject?
I'm going to let
Okay.
Rod cook, and then I have other commissioners in the queue.
See, if you put together a plan based on 24 million coming in a year, and now we're down to 5, there's assumptions in that. So the funds that would have been available to the Vets Village through the full funding process, we are now saying we don't think we have that. So we're hitting the pause button, we're recalibrating, and so now we're at it's a different scenario that we're looking at. So
Okay,
that's why today, when I come to you, I say there's no funds there because those funds are somewhere else now. And so, I mean, it is what it is. It's like, this is what we're dealt with. It's like, we thought we had 24 million, we're not sure. And you ask us to, at bare minimum, how do we, the least harm, present that to us, and that's what we've done here. So it's not, I don't know how to make it more plain other than we're trying to accommodate a massively different budget than we were looking at just a month ago.
Okay, fine, thank you, Rod. I have commissioners in the queue that need their comments. Commissioner Schrader, you're up.
I just want to thank Rod and our finance folks for all the work you've done, Elizabeth, and to at least help us. I'm going to talk about the ramping this up incrementally. I think that's kind of where I see this going. It's been if I was to tell you something that kept me up all weekend, it was trying to figure out how to deal with this. But I would like to have it on the record that Mr. Madcore also went through every other piece of available funding to see if we could ramp it up with some of those funds. And you have worked to see how we can use funds to continue to ramp up. I know that will frustrate some of the advocates, but we're all frustrated with this at this point. I think that I'm going to make a suggestion that, again, I already mentioned 2, and you said, I think we need a work session on this. Just simply so Commissioner Savas, who has a lot of questions, can get answered. I have a few questions too. I'm not going to ask them now. I think it's better spent in a work session.
Okay.
Okay, and I just want to say that I would also suggest, I know Commissioner Savas and I have talked about pulling together, working together, and potentially doing a work group with the larger advocates out there. So with their frustration, we can try and get them all on the same page.
Okay.
That this commission is committed to our LIP, okay, to what we decided to do, and we're going to work as hard as we can with them to try and ramp it up within what we're constrained with. I know that sometimes people don't believe we're constrained. We are constrained, but I do think that there's a way through it. So what do you think of that idea, Commissioner Savas? Work group, what?
Yeah,
Some kind of a-
I think, and I said it last week, I'm gonna say it again today, I don't want to point fingers at anyone, but and again, I want to separate our staff versus the
Right.
Metro advocacy group that put this here together, to put all this together, but we were all led to believe, our staff, the counties, the 3 counties, were all led to believe we would have a large sum of money coming here at the end of the month, okay? And that's not happening. And hasn't been explained thoroughly, really, why what was suggested would happen is really not happening. I can understand that, it's clear, but why did they go astray and then kind of leave us all hanging? It was to be ramped up. So I think, really, frankly, in order to get there and stand up an organization, I have experience at that, by the way, not at the government level, but I really feel that there's a need to understand the details and to guide us through this and work with our staff in a constructive way, and Metro staff perhaps, and figure out how we can tackle this, because the payback of the loan, even, I mean, all these details to stand this up are complex. And I don't think we've got the business acumen on some of these Metro committees, or is it even their focus to stand this all up? And that's really on the counties. I don't know what we can learn from Washington County or what we can learn from Multnomah County as far as standing this up. I anticipated that we would be leveraging some of our H3S departments and services already and just augmenting those services with funds. You know, I anticipated that many moons ago, but yeah, so Commissioner Schrader, I really think that's the smart thing. And we need to expedite it, because we got till the end, we got to do something before the end of the month.
I am ready to adjust the schedule right now, listening to my commissioners. We have a placeholder policy session for next Tuesday, June 8th, that was already scheduled. And you asked a question, what are the other counties doing? Washington County had hired 17, and they borrowed from the reserves and contingencies. I guess they don't anticipate a wildfire or an ice storm. They never had some of the stuff that we had in this county. And frankly, I would never do that. I would never allow us to do anything like that. Multnomah County hired 40 new positions, and they took out a loan. But they also have different taxes than we do. Their chair told me they took out a loan. And Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I wanted to address your question to Interim Director Cook. Is that what I say? Regarding the Veterans Village. Our local implementation plan was actually applauded by the Metro Oversight Committee for doing exactly what Rod Cook had tried to explain, that we as a county have put some general fund into housing and homelessness. And a big concern of this commission is to make sure that we also provide support to our rural areas outside of the metro region. And that is why those funds, those general funds, have been rediverted within the budget that we just passed to be used for the rural areas. Now, I'm sure, given that we don't know how much money is available, we could probably pull those back into the region and fund with those general funds the Veterans Village, and that would take care of $300 and some thousand.
I have a question for Gary. Oh, are you done? Go
No,
ahead.
no. I have a few questions. I want to follow up on what Commissioner Savas was saying about the hotel motels, the 143 individuals. My understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong, but those, I guess, overnights are paid for with COVID dollars because it was a COVID issue, federal funds that are paying for those. So in my mind, that big chunk of these dollars could be fronted with ARPA. Is that what you say, Stephen? Is it ARPA? ARP?
I just did American Recovery Plan, ARP, yeah, but there might be an extra A in there or something as well.
American Recovery Plan, which would free up just almost $6 million to allow us to do the wraparound intensive work of getting those people out of those hotels to housing, of which that is what the homeless services measure is intended to do. So that could free up some money there. And then the Metro 300 that is paid for through Kaiser dollars, through HealthShare, if those individuals were told, look, you no longer have funding. These are seniors, people with disabilities. This would create a serious public health crisis. And during this, we don't have COVID under control. We may think we do because we have maybe half of our population vaccinated, but it is still a serious issue, of which Bend just saw overwhelmed hospital situation. These are seniors, people with disabilities, definitely a nexus with COVID. So I would like to suggest that when we come back on Tuesday, we explore the possibility of fronting some of these expenses with ARP dollars to be paid back And potentially with interest. Maybe we charge the homeless services measure interest and do an intergovernmental fund transfer so that our ARPA dollars could benefit from fronting these dollars. But I want to suggest that we remember that we approved a local implementation plan, that we want to support that. Yes, there's always going to be startup. We have so much capacity building to do already within the ramping up of this measure that it only makes sense to be thoughtful as we move forward and to take a very thoughtful, conservative approach. But we have some flexibility here. And did I misspeak? Is anything that I said not true? Okay. So maybe on Tuesday, we can have some other ideas of what can we do to get to the.
Couple of things. Gary, is there not $1.2 million set aside in general fund for the Housing Authority to, I was told when I came on, to take advantage of situations that could arise and give the authority flexibility?
Yes, there's a $1.2 million policy level proposal the board approved 3 or 4 years ago for housing and homeless services that went to H3S, and it became part of the base level of funding for H3S. It's part of their general fund allocation.
And so starting July 1st, would that be available, or has it already been spoken for?
Sounds like it may already be spoken for with other priorities within
Some,
H3S.
some parts of
So
it.
we've spent money we don't even have yet. Boy, golly, I love that. Okay. I'm being sarcastic here. Secondly, we approved the LIP before we knew that there was a deficiency. Please be mindful of that. And Commissioner Fisher, I appreciate that our LIP has been applauded by Metro when other counties weren't as fortunate to get theirs approved first. But we assumed that we were going to have a chunk of money to work with. And now we don't. And then somehow, I don't understand this, it's Metro's funding. It is Metro's funding issue, but somehow it's become our funding deficit. That is not the correct way to think about this, not whatsoever. And I will continue to remind the board of this. I think we have more questions than we do answers, and frankly, the answers I've heard are not satisfactory on any of this. So I suggest that we submit our questions to staff, anybody who has questions, and on next Tuesday, go forward. Gary, what do you think?
Yes, we already had the policy session scheduled for this topic, so it's already on the calendar. We'll do that for next Tuesday and bring back this again. If you do have, as Chair mentioned, if you do have questions, if you are willing to submit those in advance, we can have all that prepared for you by next Tuesday.
Commissioner Fisher, are you up?
Yeah, I'm just curious what our time frame is. I know that this was up on issues because there was a sense of urgency. What is the urgency and what is our time frame?
Elizabeth?
Well, I'll start. There are, as mentioned, there are several programs that will lose, the funding will stop on June 30th of this month. So we just need to give notice to people if indeed their housing will stop. We need to give them as much advance notice as possible. That's why we're.
How much notice?
Well, ideally 30 days, but we'll tell them when you decide, when you make a decision, so.
You know, I think we have time. I am not going to be pushed and rushed into a decision because of an arbitrary date that we did not establish, that was not our funding crisis. This is Metro's funding crisis. And I am not going to put our general fund in danger, and I'm certainly not going to put people out in the streets. So somehow, I mean, I don't understand a lot of what's happened in this housing conundrum that we have in this county. But I will say I don't like it. I don't like the way funds have been commingled back and forth. Assumptions were made, promises were made, because Metro said they were going to come in with all this money. Now that money has gone away. Well, that's how life works. I'm sorry to say. I mean, I had many disappointments in my life as well. All of us have had many disappointments, and we need to try to mitigate this. We need to honor the safety and the current housing needs, but we have to be careful with this. I don't like borrowing money from Metro, period. I don't care if they're paying us to borrow money. We can't even get the IGA straightened out with Metro. You think we're going to get the loan documents straightened out with them? So I would suggest staff, you take that off the table right now, because there is not board support for that. So coming forward, no Metro loan.
No.
If they just want to fund us, if they just want to give us the money that they promised us, that's okay, I'll take it. But I'm not going to sign a loan document with Metro. Commissioner Savas, are you up?
Yeah, well, so what I was going to say is that, let's just pretend for a moment we're not one of the 3 metro counties, just for a moment. These hotels and all these people that are housed COVID that are going to lose their place in other counties in the state are in the same situation that they are here in the 3 counties. So I don't know what the state's plan is, right, for the other 33 counties, but this is a state problem. It's not so much limited to these 3 counties. So to Commissioner Fisher, I appreciate your comments. What can we do with the American Rescue Plan dollars? Is the state looking at that? Are we looking at that? What can we do to bridge or ramp those people or transition those people into some kind of thing? It wasn't, this measure wasn't designed to supplant that in the first place, because this measure came out before COVID, right? I mean, granted the timing of when the voters approved it, but my point is this effort had nothing to do with that. We didn't anticipate almost $6 million of hotel rooms, for example, in just this county alone. So that's an expense that I think jeopardizes the whole program, so to speak, because again, at that expense per room or per household is it's exorbitant. So my idea, I want to leave everything on the table. I'm not necessarily sure that I want to just forego a potential loan, but I want to keep everything on the table. But I want to add something on the table is, what is the state going to do to rescue all these people in the 36 counties that are going to lose their funding July 1st or June 30th? And my assumption is that these APRA or ARPA, those rescue plan dollars, were the plan. And there needs to be a transition in there. So we need to look to the state as well. That's my point. And I don't know who our liaison is at the state level, or our lobbyist, or our state representative that's in the lead of this, but we ought to be looking at every option and open every door to figure out how we take care of those folks, because this is not just 3 counties.
Chair Smith, I have a question for Mr. Madcourt. Is it my understanding with some of the documents that you've sent us that some of these additional dollars, in your legal estimation, can't be used like ARPA dollars for any kind of a ramping up of this particular program?
Commissioner Schrader, was that a can or a can't, you asked me?
My understanding was it was a no, based on your opinions.
We were asked the question whether we can fund staff, whether Housing Authority can fund staff with either rental assistance dollars or the ARP dollars. And the answer was, unless you can tie it to COVID, then the answer is no. But it depends on, can you tie it to COVID? And if you're talking about what Commissioner Savas is asking about, is continuing to keep people in hotels due to the COVID pandemic, then we say yes, if we can make that connection, those dollars are available for that type of placement.
Okay. What about the folks who are in apartments that are going to lose their funding?
I think the apartment funding is going to come through the rental assistance program that Ed was talking about earlier, because the difference is on some of these is keeping people in existing housing and keeping people from houselessness. And so there's separates between those 2 different funding sources. And then there was still some of the CARES Act funding, which is expiring, but that was eligible as well. But if it's COVID related, then our advice will be make the connection and try to get these services funded. But if it's just staff to ramp up for the supportive housing services measure coming out of Metro, which has, like Paul said, no relation to COVID, the answer to that was no, unless you can make some connection.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's the staffing versus the actual service delivery piece of
Correct.
it. And the conundrum is that if we don't have the staffing, we won't have the same level of service, Rod? Is that kind of what we're saying? Never mind, it's okay. We don't have to answer that. That would be my guess.
Commissioner.
That'll help us.
Okay, good. Will it, Fisher?
Thank you, Chair Smith. I just wanted to clarify something that you said, Chair Smith, that we don't have the money. It's my understanding, so please correct me if I'm wrong, because information does change, But my understanding is the money is coming in slower, but the latest revenue forecast, instead of the 24 million, 24.5 million has us at like 32 million at the end of the third quarter as the forecast, given how the tax revenues are going to be collected. Is that still true? Okay, I just wanted to correct that. The money is anticipated to be there. I want to say I really support what Commissioner Savas is saying, and I really want to ask who we would talk to, if as commissioners we can make a call to whoever it would be. I don't know, Nancy's in the audience. This is part of a COVID emergency. Oh, wait, you're not. Where's our emergency? Where's Daniel? Oh, my gosh. Anyway, congratulations, Nancy. This may be part of our emergency response to look at, can we get an extension for those dollars that are paying for those vouchers for those hotel rooms? I really support what Commissioner Savas is saying. And I would like to know, I've been a part of working in my time in bureaucracy where we've had to cut services, and there are administrative rules that require certain notice requirements. Do those apply here? What are they? Do we need to do some research? I just want to make sure that we don't get behind any requirements if we are going to be, if this board doesn't make a decision quickly enough to solve the problem. So, Stephen, I'm looking to you.
Commissioner Savas?
Can I get a response?
I'm your problem solver? Is that what you asked me?
Yeah, no, I would like to know if we have a requirement, like when state services, when there's going to be a funding reduction, you have to give notice within a certain amount of time. So I would like to know what our requirements are.
That would be a department question. I mean, this is all H3S and HAC. This is not a county council question.
Okay, so Rod, I'm looking to you.
Most contracts, there's a 30-day provision within the contract, so we're going to terminate a contract in a date that wasn't predetermined, we would have to give 30-day notice. With individuals, I doubt if there's any level of language that occurs there, but I'd have to check that out in terms of where we go to the funding source to see if there was any legal issues there.
Okay, well, I would like to suggest, I see there's a side conversation going on with Chair Smith and Commissioner Schrader, so I'll wait for them to finish.
Yeah, so.
Wait, Paul, just hold, because I have a suggestion to make. So given that it's June 1st, and given that the services would end June 30th, I would like to suggest that if there is a 30-day requirement to give notice to individuals, that this board give authority to our staff to figure out how to do whatever they need to do internally so that people are not, they do not lose their services for a week. I just want to be sure about that. Does that make sense? If there's a 30-day requirement?
Yes, I mean, what I'm understanding at this moment is that I'm going to treat this as there are no Metro dollars coming in. I have 1.2 million to deal with. Okay. And based on that, I have to make some decisions and some notifications. And so what the community does with that, I think that's going to come back to the board, and just know that I'm basing this on what I've been told today, that I cannot count on Metro, on the Metro dollars. I cannot count on a loan. All I have is the policy level package amount to deal with. And so I have to figure out our whole system, what I'm going to do with that. And we could probably have that ready by next Tuesday to talk about what that scenario is. Because right now, I'm thinking everybody's, I mean, it is what it is. We're speaking our truth. We're where we are. But I do think we need to alert people that things may change drastically, and to the nonprofits who are also standing up, probably hiring, probably doing all those things, all of us anticipating, on the Metro dollars. But if that's off the table, I really need to, I think for us to be, to have some integrity in this process, we need to start alerting people that things have changed drastically. And that's just me being real.
Yeah. I appreciate you being real. I think you have one chair who says the Metro dollars are off the table. You can hear from me, I'm not saying the Metro dollars are off the table. Commissioner Savas has said he wants all options on the table. I don't know where Commissioner Schrader and Commissioner Scholl are, but I don't support that. I do support making sure that we don't send people out of housing to homelessness. That I want the support of my board to assure that this.
Commissioner Fisher, you're the only one who has said that. I take great exception with that statement.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Gary Schmidt said we would need to give notice, and we don't know if we have to give 30 days notice, or if we can give 3 weeks notice, or 2 weeks notice, so we need to find that out. If it comes out as after Rod Cook does his research that we need to give 30 days notice, then I'm asking this board to give authority to staff to do everything in their power to keep people maintained in housing.
That will not happen today. We are going to have a session next Tuesday, and we're going to methodically work out this problem with the funds that we have available and with the funds that we know are coming from Metro. Commissioner Savas, were you in the queue?
Yeah, I am. So we need to clear the air on this, because we're here discussing this because of a problem that we did not create, and that is the uncertainty of how much money is coming. So my question to Elizabeth, in response to Commissioner Fisher's question about the $32 million, the new forecast, what basis, what document, what assurity are you confident sitting there today that we're going to have $32 million annually when the auditor's report says the spread could be as low as $14 million per year for Clackamas County, up to 30 some odd million at best? I don't know what document do you have that I don't have?
So I was agreeing with the announcement or the learning of 32 million in the first year. So when I spoke with Metro, they had initially received an estimate of receiving 32 million. However, when they spoke to, when they were giving out the projections to the counties, they gave a more conservative number of 24 million. And so that was given to us, and that's what we used. And then since then, they have found that they could be more, give out the 32 million number because they felt more confident in that amount coming in. So I was agreeing with understanding that knowledge, that is what was being given as information. I have no knowledge on the collection, the research, the analysis of how these tax dollars were identified with Metro and their company, Eco Northwest.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I just want to say that I just don't want us to presume we're going to have $32 million, July 1 of next year, or July 1 annually for, from here on forward. Anything, it'd be great. Between the court case that's yet to be determined and between this Metro audit report, it's clear that we cannot rely on a $32 million figure. And that's why we're here. We're here. I don't know, the media covered the court case a little bit, but I just don't know why they haven't covered, frankly, this funding, this, I won't say a promise, but all staff in this region were assured that we would see this amount of funding in 30 days. And now it's not coming. That's the big deal. To me, that ought to be the headline. And that's what we're coping with today. That's why we're here today discussing this. That's why we spent so much time, is that money is not arriving anywhere near the timing, and even the amount annually is still up in the air. So I just want, that has to be on the record. That has to be a factor in all our decisions going forward.
I honestly have to say, I think the way this is rolled out has really been making, there's an issue of trust here. It's just an issue of trust. And I don't like saying that, but it just, we can't be assured, and I have agree with Commissioner Savas, I've been very worried and disturbed by that. If we can't trust what we're being told, it puts us, now we are in the hot seat. We are going to have to figure out a way to ramp up. I think that's our duty. I wouldn't be totally adverse, Chair Smith, to taking $5 million from Metro as long as there's no interest and that we pay it off on our timeline and not theirs. Okay? It's kind of holding my nose to do that. I feel that, but, so I don't want to contradict anything, but let's at least see where we end up after staff does the research, and let's see how we end up after, we're gonna have to do this fast, to see what other dollars are out there that we could potentially tie to COVID to help move this forward. To me, those are the things we need to do. And I'm sorry we're on a tight time frame, but frankly, that isn't our fault either. I mean, we trusted people, and I, in a way, in a real way, feel like that trust has been betrayed to this county and to our constituents. But anyway.
Any other comments on this particular issue? Gary?
We'll be back next Tuesday, June 8th, for another hour discussion on this, and perhaps you could make some decisions there. You just spent an hour talking about this.
As we go forward, we can become more clear on what this board is palatable to this board, what we're going to do, any funding sources. I am going to ask for a vote individually on them.
Okay.
I'm not going to lump everything together in one bucket. Just know that. And each commissioner will have an opportunity to chime in on each particular funding source if there are multiple. Or maybe, we'll win the lottery, who knows? So, Gary, what's up next?
All right, Commissioners, you have a lot more business to conduct, and we're almost out of time. So how late can you stay right now? Do any of you have lunch meetings?
Or we could come back at 1 instead of 1:30.
We won't finish then either, Chair. I mean, we have probably an hour's worth of more work to do here on issues.
We'll see you, Rod.
I need to use the restroom.
We have directors who have been patiently waiting in here, and I at least like to get them for a consent agenda request.
Well, for the people who are in the room, Gary, I recommend that the resolution that I've been working on for months be postponed, and since we have directors in the room, we go ahead with those.
Okay. All right, let's do that. So Sheriff's Office, you're first, Captain Eby. I'm jumping ahead to the request for consent agenda. For the Sheriff's Office, we'll do them one at a time. Lee, approval of a contract with Chem Image Corporation for the purchase of mail scanning equipment for the Clackamas County Jail. Purchase price is $179,694. Funding comes from state forfeiture funds, no general funds involved. Captain Eby, any quick update on this, please?
I know, just Chair, Board, thank you for this time. I'm Captain Lee Eby, the jail commander in Clackamas County. This has been an issue that's been increasing over time with the introduction of contraband into the facility through our mail, and this is one way that we'd be able to combat it, so we ask for your approval.
Any objections to this? Hearing none, it's a go.
Can I wait for next week, or do you need it this week?
We can go either way. I would prefer this week, but if it has to, I understand you're busy.
Could I go this week's agenda?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Next, request by the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the State of Oregon through its Department of Transportation, Commerce, and Compliance Division to provide the Sheriff's Office access to wait stations to assist with law enforcement activity. There is no fiscal impact. You're not presenting these either, Lee? Is someone online?
I just tried to bring over Jenna Morrison.
Okay.
It is not working for some reason. Let me see if I can find somebody
Okay, I
else.
want to jump ahead to CCOM. Cheryl, please come forward. House Bill 5042, County Communication Infrastructure Grant Program, $298,000 will be reimbursed from the Oregon Department of Forestry. No general funds involved. Cheryl, go ahead.
This was a super short notice grant opportunity through some communication funds that became available through House Bill 5042. It has a very short performance period of June 1st to June 30th of 2021 in order to buy us 4 remote dispatching kits, which were things that we used during the wildfire evacuation, but we borrowed from other people. This would now allow us to acquire the equipment necessary to have 4 of our own remote dispatching kits at CCOM. It's fully reimbursable, so there's no draw on the general fund, and the value of it's $298,000.
Any objections or comments? Hearing none, it's a go.
This week or next week, Cheryl?
This week because of the performance period.
Is that okay, Chair Smith?
Yes, it is.
All right, next, approval of a contract with Motorola Solutions for maintenance and equipment of the Vesta 911 phone system project. This contract is over 5 years and will be $600,000 and is funded through Oregon Emergency Management and CCOM user fees. no general funds are involved. Are you positive of that?
Yes.
No general funds, okay. Go ahead, Cheryl.
So Oregon Emergency Management actually provides our phone equipment. This is a contract to provide maintenance on our phone system. It's about $80,000 to $90,000 a year with some escalators involved, which gives you the $600,000 number. CCOM's support, or our payment of that, is only about $8,000, so less than 10% of what this overall contract is. But it is valuable for our phone system in order to be maintained and stay optimal to receive 911 calls and routed calls to our system.
Any questions or objections for the presenter? Hearing none, it's a go.
This week or next week?
It needs to go because it's in tandem with this in order to buy the phone
Okay, Chair
equipment.
Smith?
Yes, it is.
All right,
Thank
6-3.
you.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Back to the Sheriff's Office. We have Nancy Artman online. Nancy, are you there? Is she there? Okay, I'm jumping ahead. All right, Nancy, next, I'm sorry, Commissioners, I'm jumping all over the agenda. I'm going to
All right.
disaster management, which is the bottom of your agenda. While Nancy Bush is no longer the director of that department, she is covering for the interim director who is scheduled a vacation for this week, not knowing he'd be interim director. All right.
That was
Disaster
smart
management.
of him, wow.
Approval of a sub-recipient agreement with the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office for a hazardous material exercise with the local emergency preparedness committee. The agreement is for $17,345 with a 25% match, which is $4,336. This match can and will be done with staff time so that there is no general fund impact. Go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, thank you. This is for our LEPC, which is the Local Emergency Planning Committee for the Community Right to Know Act. These are ongoing grants that we get for exercises as well as updating our plan, and it is a soft match.
It's a what match?
A soft match, which means we can use the committee's time and staff time can be used for that 25% match.
Kind of like sweat equity. Any objections or comments? Hearing none, it's a go.
This week or next week?
Next week's fine.
Okay, thank
Thank you,
you.
Nancy.
Thank
All
you.
right, let's jump to Finance. Elizabeth, please come forward. The Finance Department. Approval of a grant agreement with the United States Department of the Treasury for a Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund Award. This is an award of $81.8 million. So this is just formal authority to accept these funds, Commissioners. No general funds are involved. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
That is correct. This is the formal application to receive the $81 million from ARPA through this process.
Any comments, objections? Hearing none, it's a go.
All right, this week or next week?
This week would be good.
Is that okay, Chair Smith?
Just
Yes.
because we've already
Yep,
received.
we've already gotten half of
Just
it.
put everything on this week and just be,
Okay.
I mean, obviously.
I'll stop asking, thank you. All right, I'm going to ask Rod, I know you've been waiting all day, but can we wait on you because you have like 30 items? Can we hold till this afternoon? Can we come back at 1 o'clock, Chair Smith?
Yes, I think we should come back at 1 o'clock. And Gary, are we in recess until 1?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. We'll see you early.